Welcome to our online reading tonight. This is the first of several activities that we'll be doing. And we're so glad that you're here. I don't know, I think there's at least 50 of you here so far, and who knows, maybe thousands waiting to get in. We love you, we miss you. We're sorry we're not working with you and being with you and writing with you in person. We don't know when it's gonna happen again, nobody does. But I'm glad we're doing these. We got an email today from one of our longtime Murphy Writing members of our community. And the person said, between crying, I try to write. And that really moved me because I think I'm feeling that way too. I haven't done a whole lot of writing in the last few days. I don't know if I've done that much crying, but I've done a lot of thinking about crying and a lot of worrying. So we're hoping that these online activities that we're doing will help keep us together, keep us focused. We can't change the world, but we can change how we respond to the world, how we react to it. And that's what this is about. So this is the first of our activities, and actually it's the second. Some of you probably already signed up for our daily writing prompts in the morning. So if you go to the Murphy Writing website and look for the online activities there and sign up for it, each morning on another platform at 8 o'clock, you get a brand new writing prompt. We put together a couple of dozen of these, so we're good for a few weeks at least. And you also have an opportunity to put that work online and to respond to it and have other people respond to your work, et cetera, et cetera. So this is one of the things we're doing. And on Monday at 4 p.m. using Zoom here again, we're gonna have a Murphy write-in. I'd like to say a Murphy writing write-in, but that's too much. I don't want to say that. And just we're gonna sit here for an hour or so at our computers and pads, and we're just gonna write together. I'll throw out a prompt maybe when we start. And what we usually do when we're in person, when we have a large room and people are writing together, it sort of changes the universe in a little way. And we're going to do that as best we can. We're going to replicate that. And then we'll be doing another online reading each week. We don't have to, we're scheduling our readers, but so I can't tell you exactly when that'll be, but look on our website, look for our emails, look at our Facebook and Instagram. I think that's what Stephanie called it. Look there too, because I think we have Instagram and Twitter as well. So that's what we're doing, and I'm glad you're here. And it's my pleasure to read with three friends and colleagues. Stephanie Cawley, the director of Murphy Writing, whose new book is My Heart, But Not My Heart. Kathleen Graber, forthcoming book is Beyond Repair. And so I'm giving these plugs to the books, these shout outs, because, well, maybe this will give us an opportunity to read more now that we're not running around so much. And I'm going to begin the reading. And I'm going to start with three new poems. They're double sonnets, which I'm experimenting with. Usually a sonnet turns on itself. And I decided I wanted to write two sonnets. The second one would turn on the first one. And these are about the things that are in the sky. I don't know anything about nature or what's in the sky, so I decided to ask some questions. This first is called The Book of Stars. Although the sun is almost a perfect sphere, and more than 1 million Earths can fit inside, it is considered to be an ordinary star. Does this disappoint you? Were you hoping it was exceptional? There may be more stars in the universe than there are atoms on Earth. About this, I'm not sure, but I'm certain there are more atoms than there are grains of sand or drops of water. The light from these stars takes millions of years to reach the Earth. When you see this light, imagine you're looking at your own history. Did you know that asterisk means little star, disaster, bad star? The sun is middle-aged. Until the 16th century, it revolved around the Earth, around us. This means we were wrong. It is a second-generation star. This means much of the bright material inside it and inside ourselves was once part of a larger star that no longer exists. This means that the sun one day, and we also one day, will no longer exist. Does this make you sad? Were you hoping we would last forever? Consider means to observe the stars. Desire, to await the stars. What more would you like to know? I think that line I just wrote there, this means that one day we also will not exist. That resonates a bit more than it did when I wrote that a few months ago. Sorry about that. This is called The Diaspora of Light. When he saw it shooting from the eyes of his students, Plato realized that, like imagination, light must be restrained. So he tried to chain it in a cave like the wild thing it is, and invented stories to explain the folly of perception. This light has traveled far to ignite us, and because it is always moving, it cannot be held or saved. You might say its greatest strength is that it knows it is dying, and when it does, it breaks into a million colors. Does it sadden you to learn that goldfish see more of these colors than you do? Bees, birds, lizards, they too see what you cannot see. When we were one-celled and luminescent in the pond that spawned us, there was no space in our peculiar jelly for doubt to metastasize. Why then, knowing our brilliance would fade, did we abandon that world to walk upright? Our folly is that we believed we would be happy in exile, far from a homeland to which we will never return. Is it a strength for you or a weakness, knowing that you will die? Is this why, when light ebbs during the cooler months, you find it difficult to lift your body from your bed, and you cannot stem the tide? And one more of these. I couldn't resist the title of the pun here, Stars Poetica. Forgive me. The first thing you notice is how lonely they are. What they desire consumes them. Who knows how long their longing lasts? They come from dust, like us, and to dust they will return. Forget what you were told about their twinkling. When their magnificent voices begin to trill, their songs flicker. Love, after all, attracts dust to dust, flame to flame. Who knows what a second means to them, a century? Whatever questions you may have, you should know, they have the same questions. Of course, when they wish, they do not wish upon themselves, but they do wish to be held, knowing nothing can hold them. To be held means to be restrained or consoled. Like Boethius awaiting execution in a cell in Pavia, he consoled himself composing his song, O happy race of mortals, if your hearts are ruled, as is the universe, by love. Our love, both too soft and too loud, is more than love, and dust is more than dust. As you wipe it from the credenza, as you brush it with your hand from your lapel, you must never forget, you too were once on fire. Enough of the stars. Let me return to Earth, to something very, very mortal. And I'm probably one of the few people who collects spam. The title of this poem comes from a spam. I love it. It's Peter Murphy, banned in 17 countries. I could not make that up. I don't know how I pissed off so many people I don't know, and which of their homelands have signed on to the anti-Peter Murphy cartel. I do know that when I woke my laptop this morning, my inbox burst into flame, and when I looked in the mirror, I hardly recognized my own sweet face. I wish I could start over, live a trouble-free, permanent press kind of life, but I've lived long enough to know that most things I know are wrong. Before going offline last night, this might have something to do with it, I was enveloped by pillars of light. Forgive me for asking, but how can there be wonder if everything beautiful is not strange? These are from a book fairly new called Meantime, and most of the poems in the book have time in the title or relate to time in some way. This next one is called Closing Time, and it's said very locally, at least for me. And it raises questions about something we all expect and want, and it's happiness. Closing time. The 24-hour bars in Atlantic City have 3 happy hours a day, so I can pursue happiness whenever my shift lets out. I know the end is near when the cleaners appear to scrape gum from the gaudy carpets and drizzle disinfectant over urine dripped by the dicers who don't want to lose their place at the table, gullible men who believe they can game the ivories they toss across the green felt when they can't control their bladders. I used to think life was a wall of dominoes. If I tipped one over, all my problems would come a-tumbling down. I also believed being happy was the key to happiness, but that just made me sadder. Everyone suffers, my friends, and most of us suffer more than others as we lumber down the boardwalk from Pampers to Depends, muling and puking and leaking at both ends. Do you remember the good old days when we were worried about terror and terrorists? Well, this poem now seems old, even though it's not that old, because that's what it's about. It's called This Time. Bombs are going off all over the city. First this street, then that street, and soon I begin to think there are more bombs than streets. This is how terror works. It wants me to believe the man slicing lamb at the kebab shop is planning to slice me. It wants me to believe thousands and thousands are cheering on rooftops. Terror doesn't want me to know I'm more likely to be crushed by a truck as I walk home from work. More likely to be shot by the gun my wife keeps cocked under her pillow. What I don't understand is how living in this country makes me exceptional. What I don't understand is how anyone can say God tells them to kill. I want to go to the ocean. I want to forget everything I know. I want the water to refresh my sweltering body. I want to swim out past the salty horizon and not let the waves roll me back to terra firma, where terrorists have tripwired the sand. Listen, what I'm trying to say is, thank God they didn't think to blow up a church in Birmingham or a federal building in Oklahoma. Thank God they didn't think to blow up the heartland, the salt of the earth, the middle of this country that doesn't trust its coast. Thank God they don't know how much we already fear each other. And I'm going to conclude with another poem, a time poem, and this is called Doing Time. And I dedicate this to all of you who are teachers or have been teachers, and all of you who have actually been students as well. I think it applies. Doing time. Each week, my supervisor rejected my lesson plans because my goals and objectives were the same. When I asked him to explain the difference, he changed the subject. When asked why the syllabus makes no sense, he said, quote, "You're not being paid to think, you're being paid to deliver a curriculum." When I asked how to teach teenagers who can't read to read, he put a hand on my shoulder and with the other pointed toward the horizon, which happened to be the men's room at the end of the corridor, and said, "Take them where they are." When I turned to ask what that meant, he was gone. I figured he was off to help another teacher or meet a parent, but when I saw him first in line at the lunch counter, I knew I was wrong again. I also knew I wasn't meant to teach anything important to the dark-skinned students that sat in front of me. Like them, I was meant to fail. And because I was teaching stupid kids, I figured I must be stupid too. Even if I wanted to, I'd never be promoted to supervisor like him. So I thought, screw it. And I read my kids a poem about nature, and they said, "Man, that's dumb." So I read them a poem about love, and they said, "Man, that's stupid." So I read them a poem about sports, and they said, "Man, that's nice." So I read them a poem about death, and they said, "Man, that's deep." Then I read them a poem that said something about their lives they didn't know they knew. And they said, "Let me hold that," pulling it from my hands, reading it over and over until they said, "Why ain't nobody ever told us this shit before?" And I said, "You've got to be careful. If they know how much you really know, instead of more schools, they'll build more prisons to teach you a lesson." Well, thank you for listening to me. And next up is Stephanie Cawley, who should appear on your screen magically in a second. 2 seconds. There she is. 3 seconds. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Peter. What a beautiful reading. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. There's 97 of us. That's like really exciting. The only allowable group of 97 people at the time.
Are we 6 feet apart?
I'm going to mute Peter and
please.
Now I will read to you. So I'm Stephanie Cawley. I'm reading to you from my book, which just came out a couple of weeks ago. So it's been a kind of wild time to have a brand new book out. I had to cancel my trip to AWP where I was hoping to launch it. But I did a little reading like this, but from my couch last night, and now I'm reading to you all, so I'm really glad to have this chance. So a couple of things you should know. So I wrote this book in the aftermath of my dad dying suddenly of a heart attack. So it's a book that really writes out of and about the experience of grief. It's one long book-length work that's broken into a couple of sections, and some of it looks like prose and some of it looks like poems. So what I put together for you tonight is like a sequence that's out of order that pulls in some of the poem parts and some of the prose parts. What else do I want to know? I'm saying all this also because once I start reading, I'm just going to like read a bunch of stuff. So be prepared. The other thing you should know is there's some like brackets in the book. So there's some sort of pauses. I don't think you'll be able to see it. Some pauses where I'll be kind of like pausing, and that's why. Okay, I think that's all you need to know. Oh, the one other thing is I did some research in the course of writing this book into the field of neuroscience about the way that grief and depression impact language, which you can see by studying the brain. I am not an expert on any of this, but I did read some kind of cool stuff. So you might hear a little bit of that in the poems too. Okay. In the after, you lie down with a stone in your mouth, your body all arrow, desire to follow. Alone in the ground, you become a seed, a thirst, a dark that collides with a thicker dark. Whether you are a woman or not determines your likelihood. As if before this, you never considered what else you might become. For you knew the color, but not the touch. An old story, one you almost forgot, of a woman who becomes a thicket, a swamp. What water means to you, how you are tethered, what kind of cord. Whether ash is unnatural or salt or flood. Does your mouth go wreath when you want warmth? Do you say fallen instead of fallow? Does your tongue get stuck in the gap between is and was? There is an actual shrinking. List all the animals you can. Echo back these 15 words. You are a thin glass of water. You are a cold wind and a field. Don't make them a story. I dream a storm full of planets orbiting a black hole and the inevitable hiss of smoke. I read a book about how big the sky could become before swallowing us up, and only later learn it's not speculative, but fact. My sibling laughed. He didn't show up for work because he was dead. Of course not, and is a scary blast of wind across my back. I couldn't move then, is how I explain it. I truly could not coordinate the movement of my limbs. In that bleakest atmospheric, how I can't quit imagining the sun and the diamond patterns in the linoleum, as if there was something there to be deciphered. I try to imagine a rib as a home, a woman who did all the naming, originary, instead of having to come along and turn stone into gold. Already at the beginning, there was a stone, and there was a woman who married the stone in order to become a lake. In the center of, she wore an amulet against the enveloping cold. At the center of the world, there is a poem, which is a form of nothing, a form that nothing takes to carry itself up and through. I learned to think of the center of my body as not my body at all, but a column for things just passing through, open and open again. The line I thought I remembered, how a woman can desire to be filled and filled, isn't there when I go back and look. I used to know how to put words together, and then they all fell from my mouth. It made more sense to write than an argument, more sense to make a text full of holes than anything real. Then one morning I woke and wrote a cogent argument and didn't want to become that again. Or did. I wanted my voice to be, but I didn't want it to mean a thing had ended. I read that depression can be a ballast against what can't yet be. It's this searching after purpose, my therapist tells me, that's not good. There are levels I can't remember, but the one she said is good is just acceptance of things as they are, the meaninglessness of chipped mugs, the inevitable collection of rain in the gutter, the spines of books broken or given over to mold, and the tiny lice that nibble the glue till the pages in loose sheaves. Is it obvious here that the book is for the body, and my father's, its collapsing spine, its heart's faulty wiring? We came home from a weekend away to find a pair of wings outside the back door with the whole body missing between. I had made up an image like this in a poem once, but here truly were a pair of wings with no bird holding them together. Is this what I feel like? Is this my central image, that of an absence flanked by two feathery appendages, two useless mechanisms for flying, kept groundward by the loss of a heart, the musculature of the abdomen, the shiny beak and eyes? Imagine a commitment to this, the story a permanent fixture at the edge of capturing what is by way of what isn't, with all the birds erased out of it, all the sky replaced with water, the costume with the tiny dogs replaced by the funeral with all its tears substituted by birds. What to do with all those birds in that particular vastness, birds nesting in the high eaves of the church. I couldn't say for certain the color of between pews, but the sky was blue, or it wasn't, but it threatened to again become so like usual. In the poem I read earlier, there was talk of that room of silence so deep it leads the listeners into the roaring group of their own bodies, which seems obvious and also a kind of mercy, a thing to tell yourself when. Split between above and below, could the metaphor be rerouted or uprooted, replanted? If the is imagined as layers, networks, islands, and channels in between. A channel, a way of saying either a current, a stream, or another hour of TV. One is made of bodies, the other of fibers. Soma, another name for body. To process, meaning to break down, to repackage, to chew. All the rest invisible, the skin's temperature, a breath, blood coursing in its circuit. To imagine a way of speaking that includes the dead. Somewhere they flicker, but it's hard to make out the structure's color. An almond, a seahorse, a fold. Understand it less a topography, more a map of scatter. What needs little to survive, to breathe, a flutter, a stuck gasp. Afterwards, a towards. The ability to find a word in the body, a woman's task, a wind. Okay, thank you. I'm gonna patch over to Kathy now. Give us 1 second.
Hey. I'm gonna jump up and turn on a light very quickly.
Yeah, we picked a sunset time accidentally.
Accidentally, it was ambient until it wasn't.
Yeah.
And it was just dark. Welcome everyone. I cannot believe that it's such a fantastically large audience, and I am delighted to be reading. I wish it were better circumstances. I wish we were all together. But it is still a thrill to read with two people I've known for so long, Peter and JC. They are very dear to my heart, and I feel very old to say that I went to high school with Stephanie's father, but it is, I will be holding him right here for this reading. So I'm going to read just 3 poems. The first one is long. I'm sorry, that's how it goes with me. And it's actually about my older brother who passed away. But more than that, I think it is about community and wanting to stand very proximate to the world And I can sometimes be a misanthropic person. And so at a time when we are so isolated from each other, it's nice to be reminded that even I sometimes get lonely. It's called the fifth season, and the Japanese word for this is doyo, D-O-Y-O, and there's actually it's the season between each of the seasons. This is written about the sort of season between summer and fall. But I feel today it was 84 degrees in Richmond. And so this feels like doyo to me, the sort of season between, I think I just went right from winter to summer here, but we had it's the first, the vernal equinox. Okay, the fifth season, it has a long epigraph. I'm not gonna read it. The epigraph is from a Jesuit priest named Frederick Copleston, who wrote a history of philosophy, and he's mentioned in the book, or in the poem. Okay. 1, I own almost nothing now that once belonged to my older brother. A few scratched records, Blind Faith, The Young Rascals, Blood on the Tracks, and 7 paperbacks on the history of philosophy written by a Jesuit priest. Carefully inscribed inside each, in blue block letters, is my brother's name. But tonight, because that set is on a shelf in another state, the closest I can get to him is to listen again to a hissy recording of a BBC debate, 6 decades old, between Copleston and Russell. Their argument over an argument, one of Aquinas's proofs for the existence of God. Simply because we can name a thing, Russell asserts, take the round square, for instance, doesn't mean that it exists. This is what I think as I say doyo, a word a friend has given me so that I might better understand my own dizzy head this first week of September. For doyo is not, as it is often translated now, the dog days of summer, but rather the fifth season, a season between seasons, those days after the rains have passed, when centuries ago on the other side of the world, everyone understood that it was necessary to carry everything, scrolls and linens, shoes, even the wooden stools, outside so they could be dried and cleansed by light. Even the kimonos of the dead must be carried, Basho writes, so that every yard was restrung with grief. And though there are 4 fifth seasons, they too thought mostly of this one, its afternoons of ripeness and loss, the harvest upon us or already past, the bushes becoming tinder, the chlorophyll in the alders and maples giving way to the yellow and reds of carotenoid and anthocyanin, so that soon, even as the engine of the sun goes on roaring, the shoulders of the paths begin to fill with bright leaves. I have worn my mother's wedding ring since before she died, since the day her fingers first swelled, even as her arms and legs grew thinner. Still, I am uncertain whether or not, after so much time, it feels as though it is my own. In a house I seal shut each autumn, there's a painting by my father. When I return, the abstracted images of the horses and riders brushed directly onto plywood are paler than I recall. Do you know the story of Little Bear? His mother bundling him in a coat and a hat to play in the snow. But these are, in the end, not as warm as his own fur coat. Soon I will take off even my skin, and each loved thing will be lovingly held by someone I have never met. This is, of course, the best case scenario. If this is the time of which Isa wrote, the wind chimes are silent, but the clocks still tick. I would like to hold my contingent body against the contingent body of the world. Squeeze the half lemons with my thumbs, pare away the zest with the smallest knife in the drawer. Yesterday, without warning, lightning took down a tree directly across the road from where I was standing. The air was electric, but the sky was blue. And last summer, one of my students, riding home on his bike, was struck by a car driven by an 85-year-old man. The driver leapt out and, seeing him unhurt, grabbed the sides of the boy's head, one palm to each ear, and pulled him toward him and kissed his brow. I would like to open again to the spot in the text where my brother once underlined a proof for the existence of angels, or the place he noted the dictum not on the primacy of the intellect, but on the primacy of the will. Today, I sank into black dirt the roots of the chrysanthemums. I lifted the quilt from the dryer and spread it on the bed. Elsewhere, neurologists worked on the science of consciousness. I find it easy to both believe and not believe that I think, therefore I am. To imagine that this is the one and only day, reality intricately folded, everything always still infinitely possible, even though we cannot yet grasp how. Are we moving nearer, or like the stars, farther apart? Let us stand forehead to forehead for a long moment, being as it is, as discreet and intricate as the pages of a book. I want to turn again to the passage in which it is explained how love is greater than knowledge. So I'm just going to read 3 poems that actually appear one right after the other in the middle of the book. This is the book. It is called The River Twice. Trying to get it into focus for you. It came out last fall from Princeton. This is called Self-Portrait with No Shadow. I was not going to read this, but it is set in Wildwood, and so I feel like I should read a Wildwood poem, a New Jersey poem. Although for me, this is pretty strange. It's not as long as the other one. There's that too. Okay, Self-Portrait with No Shadow. My birth was a cloudless morning. Everything was blue. My body was as round and gleaming as a plate. Our island was as narrow and cold as a blade. The first fruit I tasted was the donut peach, its pit a hard heart beneath a shroud of meat. For a time, I lived between 2 brothers, one with a door of iron, the other with no door at all. For years, their mouths were petals of silence only I could understand. Their fingers, when they put their hands in mine were only so much warm air. Our mother was a black Singer sewing machine. Our father, a pair of red dice. Our names, the dates of our births and deaths, are snake eyes blown by the wind into the dunes where rabbits burrow. My great-grandfather, standing under a low sky in a distant land, might have mistaken the waves for gray furrows as he petitioned the heavens for rain and sun to turn the fields from ice to mud to green, turnips and potatoes growing beneath the ground like white and purple stones. As a child, I stole my way into a maze of glass and mirrors. There I bumped into myself at every turn. At every turn, I tried to slip away. The minutes were a funhouse, invisible walls against which I banged my nose. The truth is, my shadow will go on living forever on that island no one can find, the island I am too sad to visit. Each day, it puts on all the coats I left behind, one atop the other, turns the collars up, and waits for the kettle to sing. It watches as a wren tears a hole in the screen of the kitchen window and carries off a thread of rusty wire in its beak. The last poem I'm going to read mentions the very famous American poet, John Ashbery. If you don't know John Ashbery, or you don't know his poem, I mean, he's passed away now, but he's a very idiosyncratic poet, probably one of the most influential poets of the 20th century. Strangely, he gave a reading in Ocean City, New Jersey. If you were there, it was an amazing event. It was late in his life. He had an Elvis impersonator as his limousine driver. So John Ashbery and Elvis together. He happened to pass away on the same day as Walter Becker, who was one of the founding members of Steely Dan, the band Steely Dan. And so this is a poem that thinks about Walter Becker and John Ashbery. And it has, its title is actually a title of a jazz standard, There Will Never Be Another You. Maybe everyone who ever wanted to be John Ashbery can be John Ashbery now that John Ashbery is no longer busy being himself. And maybe my former husband, who was always on the lookout for a few good players for a Steely Dan cover band, can be Walter Becker now that Walter Becker is no longer available for gigs. I tell myself I'm not interested in being anyone, though I caught myself admitting over breakfast that the problem with mortality is that I will genuinely miss myself when I'm gone. If I were to pray, I would pray for the world to find a way to put its 7.5 billion axes down. Yesterday, a friend sent me a link to research that found that under electroencephalography, studies of the brain show some people were no less moved by flowers than they were by a human face. Their brains lighting up for objects as though the objects were alive. And so I hold the hard, pale body of my aging washing machine in a tender embrace. We are dancing ourselves away from the wall so that I can slip in behind it to install a few feet of flexible hose. I am also putting in a valve that will know to turn the water off, even if the machine, wishing perhaps to be a water tower, asks for more than it can hold. On the shelf, John Ashbery's poems go on being what they are, just as beside them, in a book about the Kunstkammer of Rudolph II, the emperor still paces the ramparts of his castle, awaiting the 4 horsemen who are bearing drawers the feast of the rose garlands from Venice to Prague. Classic rock radio stations will go on playing Peg, playing Deacon Blues, though Walter Becker can no longer spin vinyl to hear the tenor sax of Dexter Gordon contrafacting all the things you are, as I am doing now. The glass door of the wood stove has never wanted to be a tangle of common milkweed, though the afternoon sun brocades it with pink light. In its iron belly, the day is already busy being spent. Thank you.
Okay, JC, you should be good to go.
Okay. Hi out there. Although really, we're all in here together within the sphere of poetry. Thank you for the Murphy Writing and Peter, Stephanie, and Kathy for your beautiful readings. I'll share a few poems. The first 2 are from The Damages of Mourning, which is my new chapbook. Well, relatively new. It was published in late 2018. And the first is a poem about the witness of catastrophes and suffering, which all of us are doing either directly or secondhand almost all the time. The epigraph is from Trilce 43, a poem by the Peruvian poet Cesar Vallejo. Reading with students about death camps. What escapes into you, don't hide it. The evidence, their eyes filling with it, mine too. Memories char, curling the edges of pages, photographs, maps, the sear of witness real as innards, twisting open the tropes of bread crusts, cataloged shoes, barrels of gold from teeth. Not our lives, but lives escaped into us. Grave, we open to them. And continuing in that strain, and in part for Kathy, because this poem was written in Lithuania, the poem Bud. You'll figure out as the poem goes on, the bud of what? Bud. What an exact moment. Beyond watch, clock, daily planner, nothing meted out. Pure season, expression of something immense that you barely glimpse. Coiled tight like spirochetes, hundreds squinched in a bunch. How many bunches on a bush, on a bank of them? Fragrance when sun hits, not green, but not yet blossom. Less cloud, longer light, a shift of wind to south. Imagine detonation, as though bombs have been ticking beyond notice, ticking in a rhythm so full of silence, who could count it out? Each noon, buds loosen. Scent is more intense, perfume you long for, a whiff of an awakening so piercing, it will disappear as you open to it. The brain can't hold such beauty and keep the body running. Just before it blows into bloom, you could die of it. Lilac. Cut, it will fade. You'll say it's lost its scent, but that's been given to you. And to stay alive, you've had to forget. How harsh the desire to endure. The next few poems are from a new book, not published yet, but it will be coming out in 2020. It's titled Beyond Repair. And Able Muse Press in California is publishing it. That's A-B-L-E, Able Muse. And the poems are, I'll read a few poems, brief encounters with the effect of war on women in the Middle East. The first is from a conversation with my friend Fadwa, who is Iranian, and the two that follow take place in Syria. I'll read them without segues. It's war, Fadwa says. A cousin moved to Baghdad from Tehran, gone. Her children, gone. Or all of them missing, which may not mean gone, but just beyond reach, which may mean alive or not. It's war, Fadwa says, and there's no fog in her sorrow or clarity. 10 years, she says, no word, wishing no one dead, even if they are. Night Ride, Al-Raqqa, At every checkpoint, long waits, corpses. In the back seat, her water breaks, crown not stopping, newborn pushing into all of this. A bed in Al-Rajan. And let me say, Al-Rajan's in northern Syria, where the Turkish army has entered and the US has left. A bed in Al-Rajan. Bed shams scattered, linens tugged from the taut restraint of tucked in corners. The clock ticks, the heart ticks, the bird keeps drilling the tree across the courtyard that we lost in the explosions. Drill, tick, whoosh of blood, and the thick perfume of hyacinths heating up. All indivisible from this mangle. But there is no this, just fractions of flesh, a nose and no body, an ear and no body, a tongue and no body. Language without a speaker, what is it? Not the stories that rise on words, not the image as an illustration, this one, for instance, of bed, shams, scattered, linens, drilling, bird, hyacinths. These fragments, have they made the bed as Allah makes it? Although we think war unmade the bed. And I'll end with a new poem, unpublished, about a time of instability, such as we're in. But every year there are animal migrations. And though the migrations are sort of DNA programmed at the same time, the animals never know what's going to happen. So in February and March, the sandhill cranes migrate to the far north, but they stop to feed in the central plains. So I'm turning away because I have show and tell. I want you to be sure you know what the sandhill crane looks like. Okay. As the human assembles the story, its subject disappears. If the stippled clouds could murmur, one puff to another, faintly shadowing fallow fields, stirring the stubble so frayed it barely rustles. And if the rustle, like a seed head bending, brushed a vole's coat, that suboral catch and release of mammalian hair. And if the cloud murmur and the rustle in the current of air it disrupted, merged as faintly heard streamers of sound. And if that murmuration moved towards silence, as a robin's whisper note turns air eerie, the sky losing light as if tuning to its chirr. And if that ever diminishing chirr shirred into earshot and you scanned the sky for a river of blue tinged gray flowing through a field of backlit cloud, and you funneled so much of your attention into vision that your hearing was suppressed, and then you heard it, the murmur chirr and the responding ripple of murmur chirr, with a pause between them like a string plucked by a single strand of a feather, a tonal shiver you listened into with such purpose that your vision was suppressed. And then you saw it, the waver of sandhill cranes stretched into soar, ascending on thermals, and your breath slowed and your blood slowed with the wonder of vernal shift. Weeks of feeding in the shorn fields have ended. This is the last flight north to tundra, to the long leg, long neck courtship, dip and bend, to the wing flare and beak stroke, dance of nest and mate. It's a strange spring, but things are blooming and we are too. Thank you.
Thank you, JC. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Stephanie. So I hope that those of you who are watching and listening enjoyed our presentation tonight, and I hope that we see you again next time, or you see us again next time, which we'll let you know. And look for, again, on the Murphy Writing website, look for our Murphy Writing write-in, and we'll see each other writing rather than just talking about writing and listening like that. Meanwhile, 6 feet apart in the real world, but as close to our hearts as you can in this world that we're living in now. Stay safe, sanitize, keep writing, don't despair, keep writing, don't despair. Thank you.